everyone, and welcome to another edition of Rack and Roll Future Proofing Your Warehouse. My name is Ashley Felposh, and I'm your host today. Today's topic is how to gain productivity with a labor management program. When you leave today, you should have a good understanding of warehouse labor management programs, their benefits, labor standards, performance metrics, and the impact of automation on engineered labor standards. My guest today is Senior Director of Supply Chain, Andy Hunter from Connors Group. Welcome, Andy. Thanks for hopping on with us today. If you
Yeah,
don't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll jump right into our conversation.
sure, Ashley. Yeah, great. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on today. And as Ashley said, Andy Hunter, I work for Connors Group. We're a industrial engineer consulting firm, really helping companies solve problems, primarily around labor, but we do some other things as well. So we're kind of the experts in the labor space. My role at Connors is I'm a senior director of supply chain, do a lot of work on the strategy side, new offering development, and also own our partnerships. Prior to joining Connors, I spent quite a bit of my career in the 3PL space where I had many different roles from running labor programs, designing new warehouses, implementing new warehouses, and also running operations. So bring a different variety of roles to the table today, and I'm glad to be on and share a little bit with you guys today.
Yeah, we're excited to hear your experience and all your insights. So, to begin, what are the benefits of having a labor management program?
Sure. I'll start with by saying that most people equate a labor management system to a labor management program, but there are definitely additional facets to consider. And really, like a labor management program, when you boil it down, sets expectations for individuals, for leadership, around their job, their specific processes, based on what we call conditions for success. So it ensures employees can perform their duties safely with high quality, with capable supervision, solid operating conditions, well-defined best practice or processes, and really training all around that supports coaching them to develop those necessary skills. And really, the program itself sets those targets for each person. Could be units per hour, it could be performance against a labor standard, which I think we have a question later that we might get into around what is a labor standard. We'll talk about that then. But like the benefits of it, it helps with very granular visibility into the operation. And when you get very granular in what you're tracking, that can do a bunch of things. And if you think about where labor is in a warehouse, it's usually 50 to 60% of your total spend. So it makes sense to get as granular as possible how you manage that. So it can improve things like productivity, can really help on an advanced budgeting, scheduling, and planning processes. So how do you get the right labor in the right place at the right time, limiting things such as overtime, gives you valuable insights to coaching and training your employees, does a lot of stuff around compliance and reporting, making sure you have all your ducks in a row, detailed documentation, audits, internal reviews, everything's all in one spot. Really helps in employee engagement. An engaged employee is a productive employee. So it helps on the retainment side, reduces turnover, and all those things usually boil down to what our clients care most about, and that's overall cost savings. So it results of business. So how do you reduce your overall labor cost? It's not usually about eliminating labor necessarily, but ultimately, like how do you stabilize your labor pool, retain those people, and then ultimately, hopefully, it just supports you for better volume and business growth overall.
Yeah, those benefits are incredible and can help in the futures. And increasing your efficiency and reducing costs are crucial in today's competitive
Absolutely.
market. So, what are the benefits of using engineered labor standards?
Sure. First, we'll start off like what is an engineering labor standard? To not get too technical, but it is a scientifically developed benchmark to determine the time required to complete a task or series of tasks based off of some sort of time measurement. It's based on a documented process. So we talked about that before around the conditions for success. In order to have a good, fair, accurate labor standard, it's got to have those things I mentioned before around capable of supervision, defined processes, things of that nature. It includes all those things necessary for people to do their job, as well as things like personal time, fatigue, delays, and accounts for things that are variable in work. How far do I have to travel? How many cases am I picking up? The weight of those cases. And when you boil it down, it sets fair and accurate expectations for teammates or employees. They know what their targeted performance levels are expected of them. And it also provides the leadership team the proper metrics to manage their business effectively. So again, it's usually the most important thing when you're configuring that labor management system is the standards and how they're developed and what that time and specific elements are. So all that feeds into a labor management system.
Absolutely. It's incredible how granular you can get and how important those metrics are to cost savings and all the things that come with that. So, what
Absolutely.
are the most common metrics to determine associate or team performance?
Sure. So once you have a labor standard in place, the labor standard just really calculates how much time it should take for an average trained employee working under average conditions to perform that task. So once you have that in place, the most common metric is usually like efficiencies, or some people call it employee performance. And it's calculated based off of that system provided quote unquote standard or earn time. And it's divided by the actual time that someone spent doing that particular task or tasks. So like for an example, if I earned an hour worth of work based off of the standard, but was able to complete the work in 55 minutes, you divide the two, and that's roughly 109% performance that I would have been equated for that hour that I spent in the job. So that's like the probably usually tied to the employee. The next metric that's pretty important is utilization, and that's basically productive time over like shift time. Other metrics are like indirect or non-productive time, which is non-standard time that highlights things such as waste or non-value activities that may occur in an operation. And the metrics are used differently. So an individual teammate's job is to drive efficiency or performance while on task, while leadership needs to own the ability to keep people on task to drive up utilization and reduce things like non-productive time. So usually those metrics, you can look at them a variety of different ways. You can drill down, look at things at a facility level. So how is my facility performing at from an efficiency or performance perspective, utilization, especially important if you have a lot of sites, if you have multi-site responsibility, if you're a regional director or VP, how are my sites comparing from an overall performance perspective? Then you can drill down within each facility into departments, shifts, individual processes, and then ultimately down into an individual employee that you can give valuable coaching and feedback to as far as how they're performing in specific tasks.
That's interesting. And it's obvious that the metrics are foundational for assessing performance. So
Absolutely. Yep.
what are the typical productivity gains realized when employing engineered labor standards?
It depends. I always hate answering a question with it depends, but it ultimately depends on where you're starting from. So, I mean, definitely, I would say improvements can range anywhere from the 10 to 20% range, especially if you don't really have a foundational labor management program in place and you're using things such as historical averages or previous performances or budgeted UPH numbers. And then you can get much higher than that if you look at using things such as like an individual pay for performance model, where you're tying effort and skill together to reward people for going above and beyond. So that example I gave before about 109%, I technically saved the company 5 minutes of time by performing better than the expectation. So usually that 5 minutes is converted to some sort of dollar figure. It doesn't always have to be money. And that's usually paid back to the employee or shared between the company.
It's impressive. Such significant gains can definitely come from that information. So, what are the keys to sustainable productivity improvement?
So the key to sustaining it is, I would say, there's a lot of effort to make sure that you have good foundational standards as part of a labor management program. So once you have that in place, the key is keeping in that way. So a solid maintenance strategy for how you keep your systems up to date is definitely important. You don't want to have that duration of performance over time. So most operations are driving continuous improvement on a consistent basis. So if you're reducing waste or making the process easier for an employee to perform, then ultimately that will change the time it takes to complete a task. So before in that example where I did an hour worth of work in 55 minutes. Well, now maybe it only should take me 55 minutes because I drove some sort of continuous improvement. So you need to make sure that you're keeping up with your systems. If you're making changes to processes, maybe the WMS configurations, things of that nature. If you keep things up to date, then ultimately it will have sustainable improvement over time. If you let it deteriorate, then especially if you have an incentive program, you're actually going to be paying out for maybe average performance or before you're paying out for above average performance. So it's really combining the systems piece and the engineering to keep everything up to date. And then once it's up to date, sustained, like that really drives that continuous improvement culture by looking at, you have the granular data, you use it as your source of truth, driving best practices across a network of buildings, driving individual performance up. I mean, it's a great tool for really driving productivity improvements for the long haul.
Yeah, definitely. In our fast-paced, evolving world, how does automation impact the need for engineered labor standards?
Yeah. So based off of, I've heard many people call labor like one of the biggest disruptors in the supply chain. Like speaking from experience, like during the pandemic, like getting people to come to work was very difficult. Then you had the pay increases going on. So automation right now, I would say it's not a question of if someone's going to do it, but like when and where. And when you look at an operation with automation, you're definitely going to require some different skill sets too. So I would say it's very important to have that good foundation around labor, because if you have labor standards, you have a foundational labor management program, that that's your true baseline performance before I look at any sort of technology automation on top of that. Hey, I'm betting X, Y, or Z. I'm usually having to put together some sort of business justification for it. So if I have true labor management, labor standards, I now have a firm way to measure that expected ROI and provides that confidence up through the appropriate approval channels. So in the end, I think labor needs will ultimately remain. You're never going to fully get to a lights out building, especially with things moving to more high touch value added warehousing. So the ability to monitor and coach performance will always be there. But I think it will look different around automation as skill sets need to adapt, but also I think combining the two, like having a good way to measure it. If you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So I think automation will reduce the dependency potentially on labor, but it'll always be a need. And I think it's very important to have that good foundation in place.
Yeah, I love that explanation. It's crucial to balance your automation with your human labor to maximize your efficiency and adaptability of your warehouse.
Yep.
So as we wrap up our conversation today, do you have anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I would just say if you're not sure where you are, regards to labor management, some people have had programs in place for quite some time. Some people are like looking like, hey, do I need to do something different? Like, I think just looking at assessing your operation, doing a deep dive into your data, like where's your business going? Do I need to look at automation? So, plan for the future, identify where you are, but labor will always be a need. So make sure you have the foundations in place and then really lay out that roadmap, including capital investments, technology improvements. Maybe you're looking to upgrade your WMS. Like it's all just part of the overall roadmap for excellence when it comes to supply chain and warehousing. So labor management isn't the end all be all, but it definitely should be part of everyone's kind of mindset as they're looking for ways to kind of improve the bottom line, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you everybody for your insights. And Andy, thanks for joining us
Yeah.
today. We hope you found today's discussion on how to gain productivity in your labor management program helpful. If you have any questions or you'd like more information, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our contact details are provided in the description below. Until next time, take care.